I have a backup boyfriend, she joked while laughing with her friends. Smart move, I answered. Without even pausing to think, I walked straight over to the so-called backup guy, placed my engagement ring in his hand, and said, "Your turn. She's all yours." The silence that filled the room after that was so complete it almost felt unreal. Before I get into the whole story, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button and leave a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I'm 32 years old, and until recently, I was in a relationship with Vanessa, who's 29. We had been together for 4 years and shared my apartment. For the last year and a half, though, I was the only person whose name was on the lease. We got engaged 6 months ago. The engagement ring had always been kind of an inside joke between us. We were visiting a craft fair in another town when we spotted a simple hammered silver ring with one clear cubic zirconia set in it. It was beautifully made, but it wasn't gold, and the stone definitely wasn't a diamond. The price tag was exactly $100. Vanessa fell in love with it the second she saw it. She told me it perfectly represented us and said she didn't need some expensive blood diamond to prove our love. She insisted we buy that ring for the engagement, promising we'd get a real one together on our 5th anniversary. At the time, I thought it was a wonderful idea. I honestly believed it showed how practical she was and that money didn't matter to her. Turns out I couldn't have been more wrong. Last night, we held our official engagement party. It wasn't anything fancy, just a small gathering with about 15 close friends packed into my apartment. From the moment people started arriving, something felt off. Vanessa looked absolutely gorgeous, but every time I walked over to her, she'd suddenly find some excuse to drift away. She kept huddling with her friends, Brooke and Chloe, whispering and laughing, or she'd end up glued to Tyler, her college best friend. Lately, she'd been spending way too much time with him because, according to her, he was giving her emotional support. I questioned it before, but every single time she'd give me the same response. "You're just being paranoid. I'd never do anything like that. Tyler's basically my brother." Eventually, we started opening gifts. People had brought us practical things, a blender, towels, household items, stuff we'd actually use. Then Brooke, who had already knocked back 3 or 4 glasses of Prosecco, stood up with her drink to make a toast. "To Vanessa and Ethan," she slurred while raising her glass. Everyone clapped. "Seriously," she continued, "Vanessa is the smartest woman I know. She's got an amazing job, an amazing man." She shot me a wink before adding, "And she's so smart she even has a backup plan. Right, Tyler?" The entire atmosphere shifted in an instant. Nobody said a word. It wasn't complete silence. It was that strange moment when everyone seems to inhale at exactly the same time. Vanessa's face turned bright red. But she wasn't looking at me. She was looking directly at Tyler with a smile on her face. It wasn't nervous or embarrassed. It looked pleased. Almost proud. Tyler, completely clueless, smiled back and lifted his glass toward her. Meanwhile, Brooke had absolutely no idea she just detonated a bomb in the middle of the room. She kept talking. "I always tell her that if Ethan ever screws things up, Tyler's already sitting on the bench ready to jump in. It's our little joke." Right then, everything suddenly made sense. It felt like one of those movie scenes where all the sound disappears except for one loud ringing in your ears. Every suspicious thing from the past 6 months rushed through my mind at once. The nights she'd claimed she was out with the girls, even though her shared location kept placing her near Tyler's apartment. The constant texting she'd angle away from me so I couldn't read the screen. Those so-called sibling lunches that somehow lasted 3 hours. The way she'd completely stopped talking about wedding venues. Everyone in the room turned to look at me, waiting to see how I'd react. So I gave them exactly what they were expecting. I laughed. Not a fake chuckle. A loud, confident laugh that filled the room. "Brooke," I said as I stood up, "that's actually brilliant. Seriously, Vanessa, I'm impressed. Having a contingency plan is smart. You always need to manage risk. Everybody should have a plan B." Vanessa forced a tense smile. I watched her eyes narrow. "Ethan, what are you doing?" "No, seriously," I said, raising my hands. "This deserves recognition." I walked over to the coat rack, grabbed my jacket, and reached into the inside pocket for the small velvet ring box that held our $100 engagement ring. She'd taken the ring off earlier while getting ready for the party. Without even looking at her, I crossed the room and stopped in front of Tyler. He was still smiling, although now it was mixed with obvious confusion. I placed the box into his hand. "Your turn, buddy. She's all yours." I didn't simply hand it over. I opened his limp hand myself and dropped the box into his palm. The silence afterward was so heavy it felt like the whole apartment had stopped breathing. You probably could have heard a pin land on the rug. Brooke stood there with her mouth hanging open. Vanessa's face lost every bit of color until she looked ghost white. "The party's over," I announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Thanks for coming. Now please leave." "Ethan," Vanessa finally shouted. "What are you doing?" "It was just a joke. A stupid joke." "Was it?" I asked without taking my eyes off her. "Were you joking last Tuesday when you were at Tyler's apartment? Or the weekend I drove to visit my parents?" Her mouth snapped shut immediately. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed Tyler's eyes go wide. Either he had no idea I knew, or maybe he didn't realize she'd been lying to him too. At that point, I honestly didn't care. "Everybody out. Now." I opened the front door, and suddenly everyone scrambled for their coats and shoes without making eye contact with me. It looked like the place had just survived an explosion. Brooke and Chloe tried pulling a crying Vanessa toward the hallway, but she fought them. "I'm not leaving. This is my home. You can't do this. It's my apartment," I answered calmly. "Vanessa, your name isn't on the lease. You, Brooke, Chloe, and especially your backup plan. Out." To Tyler's credit, he looked like he'd rather disappear than stay another second. He quietly set the ring box back on the table and practically sprinted out the door. Vanessa, Brooke, and Chloe were the last ones left. "You're a monster, Ethan," Brooke snapped. "You're making a huge deal out of nothing," Chloe added. Vanessa didn't say much. She just stood there crying. "You're throwing away 4 years over one joke." I kept holding the door open and didn't respond right away. Finally, I looked at her and said, "No. I'm saving myself from spending my life as Plan A while you keep interviewing candidates for Plan B. Now leave." Eventually, she walked out. I shut the door, locked it, and slid the security chain into place. That happened about 2 hours ago. Since then, my phone hasn't stopped buzzing. I've been flooded with messages from Vanessa, her friends, and even her mother, who I'm sure only heard the version where I'm some unstable psychopath. I haven't opened a single one. Right now I'm sitting alone in my living room, surrounded by half-eaten snacks and gift bags everyone left behind. I picked up the little ring box and just stared at it. Honestly, that $100 ring ended up being the best investment I've ever made. Update 1 3 days later. Hey everyone. I never imagined this story would spread the way it has. Thank you for all the support and, for the most part, the genuinely helpful advice. My inbox has turned into an absolute war zone, but seeing so many people on my side has helped more than you probably realize. For the first time, I don't feel like I'm losing my mind. The last 72 hours have been one emotional roller coaster after another. The night of the engagement party didn't end when everyone left. About 10 minutes after I locked the door, someone started pounding on it. It was Vanessa, Brooke, and Tyler, her supposed backup boyfriend. The 3 of them were yelling so loudly you'd think they owned the entire building. "Ethan, open this door. You're acting crazy. You humiliated me in front of everybody. We're not leaving until you talk to her." Then came the accusations. "You're controlling. Come outside. We can work this out. You're making her cry." I didn't respond. Instead, I sat on the couch, put on my noise-canceling headphones, and started a new game to keep my mind somewhere else. For about 20 minutes, they kept pounding on the door and shouting without stopping. Finally, I took my headphones off, called the non-emergency police line, and reported that several intoxicated people were refusing to leave my property and were causing a disturbance. I put the phone on speaker and turned the volume all the way up. The dispatcher could be heard clearly through the front door. "Sir, are you in immediate danger?" The The banging stopped instantly. Then I heard nervous whispers outside. "He's calling the cops. Come on. Let's get out of here. Vanessa, let's go. This guy's insane." By the time the patrol car's lights flashed through my windows, they were already gone. My phone exploded with notifications after that. It was vibrating nonstop. I ignored every single message until the following morning. When I finally started reading them, it felt like I was taking a masterclass in emotional manipulation. Vanessa sent me more than 80 text messages and called me 15 times. Every message followed the same pattern. "How could you humiliate me like that in front of everyone? It was only a joke. You've got serious trust issues. Fine. I'm staying at Tyler's place now. Happy?" You pushed me straight into his arms. "You're throwing away 4 years of memories. My mom is horrified. She can't believe you'd be this cruel. I'm coming over tomorrow to get my things. We need to talk." You didn't even let me explain. Tyler is just a friend. You completely twisted the situation. Brooke was just as angry. She texted me nonstop, calling me names. "You're sick." Vanessa is devastated. She loves you, and you treated her like she was some kind of monster. "I hope you're happy being alone, you insecure weirdo." You completely overreacted. It was just a joke. You humiliated her for absolutely nothing. My response was simple. I didn't answer a single message. Instead, I blocked everyone. Vanessa, Tyler, Brooke, Chloe, and even Vanessa's mom, who insisted her daughter was a wonderful person and that everything had been one big misunderstanding. At 8 o'clock the next morning, a locksmith showed up. He installed a heavy-duty deadbolt and replaced the main lock. Cost me $280, and honestly, it was money well spent. After that, I started packing. I spent the entire day boxing up every single thing that belonged to Vanessa. Every tube of lipstick, every pair of shoes, every outfit, every bottle of shampoo, and every personal item she owned. I packed everything with almost surgical precision. Along the way, I found gifts I'd bought her over the years. I came across handwritten notes I'd left for her. That part hit harder than I expected. I'm not ashamed to admit I sat on the closet floor for about 10 minutes, feeling completely hollow. 4 years together had been reduced to a stack of cardboard boxes. But that sadness didn't last long. The anger came rushing back. On her desk, I noticed a framed college photo of her and Tyler smiling together. That went into a box too. That's when things became a little more complicated. There were 3 larger items that belonged to her. An antique-style vanity that her aunt had given her, a bookshelf, and a $700 ergonomic office chair she'd used while working from home. The chair was different. I'd bought it 6 months earlier using my own credit card. She promised she'd repay me little by little. We were both clear it wasn't a gift. I paid because she couldn't afford it at the time, and she agreed to reimburse me. As of that day, she had paid exactly $0. Around 4 o'clock that afternoon, someone knocked on my door again. I checked through the peephole. This time, Vanessa had come alone. She didn't look sad anymore. She looked furious. I opened the door but kept the security chain locked. The moment the door cracked open, she shoved against it. "Ethan, let me in. My key doesn't work." "I know," I answered. "I changed the locks." "What did you do?" "You can't do that. This is my home. I have rights." "No, Vanessa. It's my apartment. You're not on the lease. You still officially live with your parents. You never changed your address, never paid rent, never put a single utility in your name, and you always said this was temporary until we got married. You were living here as a guest. And you're not welcome anymore." "A guest?" she snapped. "I've lived here for 2 years. You can't just throw me out." "Actually, I can. And I already have. We're finished. You can't end a 4-year relationship over one joke. I'm here for my things. Your personal belongings are packed in boxes by the front door." She completely lost it. "You packed all my stuff?" "I can't believe you. Open the door." "No. You can arrange a time to pick up your boxes. You'll have 30 minutes. And you'll only be taking what's already in the entryway. Her face turned dark with rage. What about my furniture? My vanity? My chair? The vanity is yours. It was a gift. The bookshelf is yours too. I paused before continuing. But the chair? I paid for that. You promised you'd reimburse me. You never did. If you bring me the $700 you owe, you can take it. She stared at me in disbelief. That's extortion. You're stealing my property. I need that chair for work. Then maybe you should have paid for it. Or maybe you shouldn't have kept a backup fiancé. She threatened to call the police. Go ahead. I'd love to show them the lease. I'd also be happy to show them the credit card statement. Then you can explain how your little joke led to all of this. She glared at me with pure hatred. Then she started crying. Not because she was heartbroken. Those were tears fueled by anger. You're going to regret this, Ethan. You have no idea. She turned around and walked away while dialing someone on her phone. At that moment, I had 14 neatly stacked boxes of her belongings sitting in my entryway. Part of me expected the police to show up over a theft complaint. The other part was honestly waiting for someone to throw a brick through my window. As crazy as everything had become, I felt lighter than I had in months. The anxiety that had been building inside me slowly disappeared. All that remained was clarity. And one incredibly comfortable $700 office chair. Update 2 weeks later. 2 weeks have passed. And somehow this entire situation has become even more ridiculous. The level of entitlement I've witnessed is honestly unbelievable. Vanessa wasn't bluffing. 2 days after my last update, 2 police officers knocked on my front door. I checked through the peephole before answering. I'd already guessed why they were there, so nothing about it surprised me. Outside, Vanessa stood beside her car with Tyler, her self-appointed backup boyfriend. The two of them looked like they'd rehearsed the whole scene. She had perfected the role of the helpless victim, while Tyler stood there trying to look like the outraged hero coming to rescue her. I took a slow breath, straightened my shoulders, and opened the door. The older officer looked exhausted, like someone who'd already dealt with far too many pointless domestic calls that week. His younger partner stayed quiet, carefully studying everyone involved before saying anything. Sir, the older officer began in a flat, tired voice. We received a report about a domestic dispute. I'm Ethan, I replied calmly. Good afternoon, officers. There isn't any domestic dispute happening here. Outside, Vanessa stood with her arms folded, her eyes red and her expression carefully arranged to earn sympathy. She's my former fiancée, I explained. I ended our relationship last week and asked her to move out. Since then, she's done nothing but create problems and disturbances. It feels like making my life difficult has become her full-time job. He locked me out. Vanessa interrupted with a trembling voice while looking directly at the officers. He stole my belongings. He has my expensive office chair. The older officer let out the faintest sigh, almost too quiet to hear. It sounded like he'd already decided this was more personal drama than criminal activity. The younger officer stepped closer. Sir, if she's legally living here, you can't simply lock her out. That would be considered an illegal eviction. I understand that completely, I answered without raising my voice. That's exactly why I have the lease agreement ready. I turned around, picked up the printed copy I'd already placed on the table, and handed it over. My name was the only one listed on the lease. Vanessa had never been added as a tenant or resident. Her driver's license still listed her parents' address. Her bank statements went there. Her utility bills went there too. Based on the documents, the officers agreed she had never officially established residency there. The younger officer carefully flipped through every page. The older officer glanced from the lease back to Vanessa before speaking again. All right, but she does have property inside. She does, I replied. There are 14 boxes sitting right inside the entryway. I pointed toward the neatly stacked, clearly labeled boxes. I packed every one of her belongings carefully. I've offered multiple times to schedule a proper pickup. She refused because she wanted unrestricted access to search through the apartment herself. And after everything that's happened, I'm simply not comfortable allowing that. He's lying, Vanessa shouted, cutting me off. He kept my office chair. That chair cost $700. The younger officer looked at me. What about the chair? That's the only disputed item, I answered. I bought it with my own credit card. I pulled out my printed credit card statement and pointed to the highlighted purchase. She agreed to repay me. She never paid a single dollar. I told her she can take it the moment she reimburses me the $700. Until then, I consider it my property. Everything else belongs to her. Her clothes, her vanity, her bookshelf, her books, every personal item she owns. She can take all of it today while you're here supervising. The two officers exchanged a quick look. The older one spoke quietly into his radio, giving a brief summary of the situation. A moment later, he turned back toward us. This is a civil property dispute. We don't have the authority to force him to hand over the chair. If either of you wants to pursue that issue, it'll have to go through small claims court. What we can do is supervise while she removes the belongings that aren't in dispute. He looked at me. Do you agree to that? Absolutely, I replied. Thank you, officer. The officers walked over to explain everything to Vanessa and Tyler. The next 20 minutes turned into one of the quietest and most uncomfortable experiences I've ever had inside my own apartment. The officers remained at the front door, watching the entire process. Meanwhile, I stood in the living room with my arms crossed, doing everything I could not to react. Vanessa and Tyler spent the next several minutes making trip after trip between my apartment and the parking lot. They carried out box after box, took apart the bookshelf, and wrestled the vanity through my narrow hallway, which turned into an awkward struggle all by itself. Vanessa made sure everyone noticed how devastated she supposedly was. She cried dramatically the entire time. Long sobs, fake hiccups, dramatic pauses, and constant looks toward the ceiling like she was starring in a soap opera. Tyler was a different story. He wasn't crying. He was furious. Every time he walked past me, he stared at me with pure hatred, like I'd become the villain in some story he'd invented in his own mind. As he carried the last box toward the door, he stopped right in front of me. You're a real scumbag, he muttered. Just give her the chair and stop making this so difficult. You can send me the $700, and I'll gladly hand you the chair, I replied calmly, never raising my voice. The older police officer let out a short laugh. It sounded like even he couldn't believe how ridiculous the whole situation had become. Tyler's face instantly turned bright red. He tightened his grip on the box, spun around, and stormed out without another word. This isn't over, Ethan. Vanessa yelled from the sidewalk just before climbing into the car. You're a thief. Have a good night, Vanessa, I answered. Then I closed the door. The officers gave me a polite nod, wished me well, and headed back to their patrol car. For a while, I just stood there leaning against the front door in complete silence, trying to process everything that had happened. I honestly thought that was the end of it. I figured all the drama had finally burned itself out. Couldn't have been more wrong. Their sense of entitlement didn't disappear. It simply evolved into something much more calculated. And much more dangerous. Yesterday, my landlord, Victor, called me. He's always been a calm, reasonable guy. In the 5 years I'd lived there, we'd never had a single issue. Hey, Ethan, he said. This might sound like a strange question, but is everything okay over there? Yeah, I replied. I'm just dealing with a messy breakup, but everything's under control. He hesitated before continuing. The reason I'm calling is because I've received 3 anonymous phone calls in the last 24 hours. They all claimed to be concerned neighbors. A knot formed in my stomach. Concerned about what? I asked. The first caller reported constant screaming and violent fights. The second claimed there was a strange chemical smell coming through the ventilation system and hinted that something suspicious was being manufactured. And the last call came about 10 minutes ago. They reported possible drug activity and said strange men were constantly coming and going from your apartment. For several seconds, I couldn't even speak. I just stared at the wall, trying to wrap my head around what she was doing. Victor continued. Look, Ethan. You've been one of my best tenants for 5 years. You always pay your rent on time. We've never had a complaint about you. I know this sounds ridiculous, and I trust you. But corporate takes reports like these very seriously. The word drugs especially gets everyone's attention. They've instructed me to schedule a formal inspection for next week. And if one more complaint comes in, they'll push for an eviction under the community safety clause. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just an emotional smear campaign anymore. She wasn't trying to hurt my feelings. She was trying to get me thrown out of my home. Everything I'd built, my stability, my reputation, my apartment, had suddenly become her next target. She was weaponizing the system against me. Victor, I said, it's my ex. She's getting revenge because I ended the relationship and made her move out. It's a long story, but every one of those accusations is a lie. There's nothing illegal happening here. I believe you, he replied sincerely. I really do. But my hands are tied. I have to carry out the inspection. And please, somehow make this stop. I don't want to lose you as a tenant. But corporate can override my decision. After we hung up, I experienced something I hadn't felt through any of this before. Real fear. This wasn't about a chair anymore. It wasn't even about the breakup. It had become a deliberate campaign to destroy my daily life, ruin my reputation, and leave me without a place to live. I'm not wealthy, but I'm not stupid either. I immediately contacted a local law firm and paid $350 for a 1-hour consultation. I explained everything from the beginning. The backup boyfriend comments, the engagement party, the police visit, the anonymous complaints to my landlord, the threat of being evicted by corporate. I also brought the police report I'd already requested and saved. The attorney listened carefully before giving me a straightforward answer. This is classic behavior from a vindictive former partner trying to regain control by creating chaos. Her recommendation was immediate. Send cease and desist letters. She began preparing formal letters that would be sent by certified mail to Vanessa at her parents' home. She prepared identical letters for Tyler and Brooke as well. Unfortunately, after 4 years together, I already knew where all of them lived. Each letter documented everything. The police incident, the harassment, the false accusations, the anonymous defamatory calls to my landlord, and every attempt to interfere with my housing or employment. The letters made one thing perfectly clear. Any future contact, whether direct or indirect, or any additional anonymous complaints would become evidence in a civil lawsuit for harassment, defamation, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. My attorney also advised me to send a formal email to my landlord and copy the apartment management company. In that email, I explained that my engagement had ended, that I was the target of an ongoing harassment campaign by my former fiancé, and that I had retained legal counsel. I attached copies of the cease and desist letters to demonstrate that I was handling everything through proper legal channels. That created an official paper trail. And right then, that paper trail became my best protection. By that point, I'd spent $350 on an attorney, another $280 on changing my locks. My landlord probably thought my apartment had turned into the center of some legal disaster. And I still had a formal inspection waiting for me the following week. All because I refused to laugh along with one ridiculous joke. What amazed me most was the complete lack of accountability. They were the ones who lied. They were the ones who crossed every line. Yet somehow, I was the one they tried to destroy simply because I refused to be manipulated. At that point, I wasn't angry anymore. I was cold. This had stopped being a breakup. It had become a war I never wanted. But I fully intended to finish it. Final update 2 months later. It's finally over. After everything that happened, I can finally say it's done. Right now, I'm sitting in my apartment. It's clean. It's quiet. The inspection went perfectly, and there wasn't a single issue. Victor, my landlord, apologized several times for everything I'd been put through. Here's how everything finally played out. My attorney sent the certified cease and desist letters. All 3 recipients signed for them. The effect was almost immediate. Complete silence. The anonymous complaints to my landlord stopped overnight. The mysterious, concerned neighbors vanished without a trace. It's amazing what an official letter from a real law firm can accomplish. Apparently, the possibility of facing a civil lawsuit for harassment was enough to make the entire group disappear. I also emailed the apartment management company with copies of those letters attached. They responded professionally, confirming that they considered the false complaints resolved and the matter officially closed. But the most surprising twist involved the backup boyfriend himself. About a week after the letters were delivered, I received a text from an unfamiliar number. "Hi, it's Tyler. Listen, I'm done. This whole situation is insane. Vanessa is completely out of control." I read the message without replying. About 10 minutes later, another text came through. "She's been staying with me. It's been a nightmare. She wanted me to call your landlord again and claim I'd seen you with a gun. I'm not doing that. I'm not getting arrested because of her. I told her to leave. I'm finished. And I'm sorry for the part one played in all this. I should have stayed out of it from the beginning. I believed everything she told me about you." So the famous backup plan collapsed the moment real consequences entered the picture. Tyler had no problem going along with it while everything still felt like a harmless game. But the second things crossed into criminal territory, he wanted out. Apparently, that $100 engagement ring came with a much higher price than he was willing to pay. The final chapter came from someone I never expected. Vanessa's mother. For nearly a month, everything stayed peaceful. I was finally moving on. I was starting to feel like myself again. Then last night, my phone rang. The number wasn't saved. I almost ignored it. When I answered, a familiar voice came through. "Hi, Ethan. It's Linda, Vanessa's mom." My heart immediately sped up. "Hi, Linda," I replied. "I have to admit, I'm surprised you're calling." "Yes," she said quietly. "I know things ended badly. I'm not calling to argue about what happened," Linda said. "All right," I replied. "So what can I do for you?" She paused before answering. "Vanessa isn't doing very well. She had to move back in with us. And Tyler. Well, let's just say their relationship fell apart almost immediately once reality replaced the fantasy. She's been struggling. She's trying to get back to doing freelance work. But..." She stopped speaking for a moment. I stayed quiet and waited. "Is her back, Ethan? She's in a lot of pain. She can't sit for more than an hour at a time. She told me that ergonomic chair you have was the only one that let her work comfortably." I almost laughed. The whole thing felt ridiculous. After trying to get me evicted, after trying to drag me into legal trouble, now they were sending her mother to guilt-trip me over a chair. "Linda," I said, "I'm sorry she's dealing with back pain. That's unfortunate. She says you're only keeping the chair to get back at her. I'm keeping it because I paid $700 for it with my own credit card. She promised to reimburse me. She never paid a single dollar. I'm not running a charity. And I'm definitely not giving away a $700 chair to someone who tried to have me thrown out of my own apartment." She let out a long sigh. This time, she sounded more frustrated than emotional. "Fine. How much do you want for it?" $700. "That's ridiculous. It's used." "That's exactly what I paid. It's also exactly what she agreed to pay me. And honestly, I'm already being generous. I could probably charge storage fees and compensation for everything this ordeal put me through." The line went completely silent. For several long seconds, all I could hear was her breathing. Finally, she spoke again. "I can transfer the money." I blinked. "Yes," I answered. "You can. And then you'll give her the chair?" "The moment the $700 hits my account, I'll put it on the front porch. You can send whoever you want to pick it up. I don't want to see Vanessa." "All right," she replied. Then she hung up. Less than a minute later, my phone buzzed. Linda sent you $700. The payment note simply read, "For the chair." I carried the now fully paid-for chair outside and left it on the porch. Then I sent one short text. "It's outside." After that, I watched from the window. About an hour later, an older sedan I didn't recognize pulled up. Vanessa climbed out of the passenger seat, hurried to the porch, grabbed the chair, shoved it into the back of the car, and they drove away almost immediately. She never even looked toward my apartment. And just like that, it was over. The entire circus finally came to an end. Once there was no more drama to feed on, everyone simply disappeared. The famous backup plan fell apart the moment it came with real consequences. The princess ended up back at her parents' house without her pride. But at least she got her ergonomic chair, courtesy of her mother's bank account. Later, through a mutual acquaintance, someone who at least had the decency to apologize to me, I found out that Vanessa and Brooke weren't even speaking anymore. Apparently, Vanessa blamed Brooke for everything. According to her, that stupid joke had ruined her entire life. The complete lack of self-awareness was honestly incredible. As for me, this experience definitely came with a price. I spent $280 replacing the locks. Another $350 went to my attorney. That totaled $630. On the other hand, I recovered the $700 for the chair. So technically, I came out $70 ahead. Financially, anyway. Emotionally, the cost was much higher. I spent years with someone whose entitlement and manipulation I never fully recognized until everything fell apart. For a while, it even made me question my own judgment. But eventually, I found peace again. The apartment is still mine. It's quiet. It's peaceful. I'm not seeing anyone right now. Honestly, I'm just enjoying the calm. I never realized how valuable peace of mind was until I came so close to losing it. I'm not claiming to be a hero, and I don't think I'm some cold-hearted guy either. I'm just someone who finally learned, probably later than I should have, that setting boundaries only matters if you're willing to enforce them. As for that $100 engagement ring, the box ended up in the trash. I dropped the ring itself into one of those jewelry donation bins at the mall. Hopefully it finds someone who'll appreciate it far more than we ever did. And that's the whole story.